Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Milanese Math. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to divide whole numbers, and we're going to do this without a calculator. Sometimes this can be referred to as long division, but if you want to follow along with the worksheet that we're going to be using, you can find that in the first link in the description below. So the first thing I want to do is get a few definitions. The quotient is the answer to division questions. So when they say what's the quotient, they're talking about the answer. Now, the remainder in a division problem is the leftovers. So that's literally what I'm going to write here is the leftovers. After we've done this process that I'm going to show you, any numbers left over, we're going to call the remainder. And you'll see an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, I want to hit three things that just kind of are important to pay attention to while you're doing these division problems. Is to remember what happens when you take 0 divided by a number. Well, 0 divided by any number is going to give you 0. So it could be 0 divided by a positive number, a negative number, a decimal. It doesn't matter. 0 divided by anything is 0. Well, what about if we flip that? What if we do a number divided by 0? Well, you're actually not allowed to do this. And if you have a calculator, you can pick your favorite number and divide by 0, and it'll say something like divide by 0, error, or syntax error, or something like that. So you're actually not allowed to divide by 0, unless, of course, you're Chuck Norris. Okay, and then a number divided by 1 is just whatever the number was. So let me show you an example of that, what I'm talking about. So if we take, let's just look at an example of each one of these. If we did 0 divided by 23, I'm just making that up, you would get 0, because 0 divided by anything is 0. If you tried to flip that and you did 23 divided by 0, you're actually not allowed to do that. There is no answer, because we'll just leave it at that. You're not allowed to divide by 0. But what happens if you did 23 divided by 1? Well, it would be whatever the number was. So in this case, it's 23. So just keep that in mind as we're working through these problems. Okay, so what's the procedure for this? What sometimes people call it as long division. And you kind of see it here in the box. The first step is to estimate, then we multiply, then we subtract, then we bring down. And then you repeat that process until you get the final answer, or the quotient. The best way to explain this is just really show you with an example. So let's look at number 1. It's 840 divided by 5. The first thing I want to do is look at that 5 and see how many times it would divide into 8. Sometimes you could say, how many groups of 5 can I get in 8? And this is where you're going to estimate how many groups of 5 could I get in 8? And my estimate is only 1, because I know if I did 2 groups of 5, that would be 10, and that's more than 8. So I'm going to say that my estimate is 1 group of 5. Now I need to multiply. I want to multiply the 1 and the 5, and that's 1 times 5 is 5, and I'll put that right there. The next step says to subtract. So we're going to subtract the 8 subtract 5, just like this. 8 subtract 5 is 3. And then the final step after we subtract is to bring down. So we're going to bring down that 4 and turn that 3 into a 34. Now we're ready to repeat the process. So again, we started to estimate, then we went to multiply, then subtract, then bring down, and then you're ready to go all the way back over to estimate and start over again. So let's estimate. How many times could you get 5 divided into 34? Or how many groups of 5 could you fit into 34 without going over? And my estimate is a 6. And by the way, if you're like, where did you come up with a 6 from? How did you know that? It's because I've memorized my multiplication tables. So I know 6 times 5 is 30. I know 7 times 5 is 35. That would put me over 34. So that's where I went with the 6. Okay, that was my estimate, was a 6. Now we multiply. 6 times 5 is 30. And then the next step is to subtract. 34 subtract 30 is a 4. And then I'll bring down the 0 and turn that into a 40. Okay, one more cycle of that estimate, multiply, subtract, bring down. Okay, estimate. How many times will 5 go into 40? It's going to go in 8 times. Next, I'll multiply. 5 times 8 is 40. Next, I subtract, and that's going to give me 0. There's nothing left to bring down. So final answer, the quotient here is 168, and there's 0 remainder. There's 0 left over. Okay? Let's try another one similar to that. Let me clear a little bit of space here for these next problems. Okay. All right, next one, number 2, I've got 38 divided by 2. Let's do that same process. Let's estimate. How many times will the 2 go into the 3? Well, I think it's only going to be 1 time. 1 times 2 is 2. There's my multiplication. Next, we're going to subtract. 3 subtract 2 is 1. The next step is bring down, and we're going to bring down that 8 and turn that 1 into an 18. Now we're ready to repeat. How many times will 2 go into 18? Well, my estimate is that it'll go in 9 times. So let's do the multiplication. 9 times 2 is 18. Let's do the subtraction. 18 subtract 18 is 0. There's nothing left to bring down, and we have 0 remainder, 0 left over. So the final answer, or the quotient, is 19. Okay, let's do another one just like that. Just make sure we're getting the hang of it. 266 divided by 7. Now this is kind of an interesting one because you would say, well, how many times will 7 go into 2? Well, you can't even go in a single time. So what I do then is bump over and look at the 2 and the 6 together. Think of it as 26. So now I could think, okay, well, how many times would 7 go into 26? And my estimate is going to be 3 times. So 3 times 7, let's do the multiplication, is 21. Next up, subtract. 26 subtract 21 is 5. And the next thing I'm going to do is bring down that 6 to get 56. Okay, so now I want to say how many times will 7 go into 56, or how many groups of 7 can I get in 56? My estimate is an 8. Next thing is multiply. 8 times 7 is 56. Next step, subtract. I'll get 0, and there's nothing left to bring down, and there's nothing left over. There's no remainder. So my quotient, or the final answer, is 38. Let's do one more kind of like that, and then let's get to some trickier ones. So we've got 350 divided by 14. Okay, 14 won't go into 3, right? I can't even get one group of 14 in 3, but I could in 35. So how many times will 14 divide into 35? My estimate is a 2. Next, we're going to multiply. 2 times 14 is 28. Okay. Next step, subtract. So 35 subtract 28 is 7. And the next thing we're going to do is bring down the 0 to turn that 7 into a 70. So how many times is 14 going to go into 70? It's okay to do some scratch work on the side if you don't have these multiplication tables memorized, but my estimate is that it's going to go in 5 times. So 5 times 14, as it turns out, is 70. Look how nice and neat that turned out. We'll do our subtraction, and sure enough, we have a remainder of 0. So it divides in evenly 25 times, or we have a quotient of 25. But what happens if it doesn't divide in evenly? Well, let's take a look at the rest of these because these have some remainders, and I want to show you how to handle those. So number 5 says 175 divided by 3. Okay, so the first step is to estimate. 3 won't divide into 1, but it would divide into 17, and I think that would work 5 times. That's my estimate. So 3 times 5, if I do my multiplication, is 15. Then I'll do my subtraction. 17 subtract 5 is 2. And I'll drop down or bring down the 5 to turn that into a 25. Okay, let's estimate. How many times will 3 go into 25? So my estimate is 8. Okay, multiply. 8 times 3 is 24. Okay, now we'll do our subtraction. Now check this out. 25 subtract 24 is 1, and there's nothing left to bring down to repeat the process. So we would consider 1 to be a remainder. So the quotient is 58, remainder 1. There's a variety of ways to write this. For right now, this is good enough. if you were to use a calculator, you would find that it's like 58 point something. And so if they don't divide in evenly, you will have a remainder. And for what we're doing today, this is good enough. We just call it 58 remainder 1. Let's try another one kind of like that. Okay, number 6, how many times will 7 divide into 9? It's going to be 1. So 1 times 7 is 7. And I'm going to take 9, subtract 7, which is 2. Okay, I'll bring down the 2 and turn that into a 22, and I'm ready to estimate again. Okay, how many times is the 7 going to go into 22? That would be 3 times. Okay, let's do our multiplication. 3 times 7 is 21. Next up, I need to subtract those two numbers. So 22 minus 21 is just 1. And bring down the 8 to turn that into an 18, and we're ready to start over again. Let's estimate. How many times will 7 go into 18? The correct answer, or my estimate at least, is going to be 2, because 2 times 7 is 14. So let's do the subtraction. 18 minus 14 is 4. And we've got one more number to bring down, which is a 1. Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. How many times will 7 go into 41? Well, my estimate is that it would go in 5. So 5 times 7 is 35. And what you'll notice is when we subtract, we get 6, but there's nothing left to bring down, which tells me that 6 is a remainder. In other words, 7, if you look at the original problem, 7 doesn't evenly divide into 9,281. It would be, the quotient would be 1,325, remainder 6. And for now, you can just leave it like that. Oh boy. Okay, one last example here to go. How would we handle this one? Well, we've got 299 divided by 26. When I go to estimate, I'm really looking at this entire number. How many times will 26 go into 2? Well, it wouldn't, but it would go into 29 one time. So my estimate is 1. And I'll take 1 times 26 to do my multiplication. Next up, we've got to subtract. And so that's going to give me a 3. Then I'll drop down the 9 to turn that into a 39. And how many times will 26 go into 39? Well, again, it's only going to go one full time. So 1 times 26 is 26. When I do that subtraction, I've got a 13 left over, but there's no more numbers to bring down. So I would say that that is my remainder. So 299 divided by 26 is 11, remainder 13. Okay, now I know there's other ways to do division, and of course you could use a calculator, but it's nice to know how to do this in case you don't have a calculator or for whatever reason your teacher is asking you to do that. So hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, consider subscribing to the channel. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.